Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. Hello, this is Adam Huss coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Thanks so much for listening. No, really, thank you for listening. It's a strange thing to put something out into the world in which I express my thinking today, but that will endure well into the future. I have no doubt that future me will tune into this podcast and be a bit or a lot embarrassed by the things that present me says and thinks. I guess that's inevitable as I learn and grow and change, hopefully into a wiser, more conscientious person. And so it is with a lot of humility and gratitude and joy that I get to put these conversations out into the world. So thank you for being along for that ride. I'll at least try to take the scenic route. Today's guest is Jack Sporer of Fresco Wine and Magnolia Wine Services. This is a great episode for a beginning winemaker thinking of starting their own brand and considering how to make that dream a reality, because Jack is the owner of a custom crush winery facility. Unless you are independently wealthy or inherited a vineyard, you are likely going to start your winery in something like that, a sort of co-op or shared winery space. And since that's how I make our wine for my brand Centralas, whose wines, by the way, are available for sale at centralaswine.com, the purchase of which supports this wonderful podcast. And since Jack owns one of these facilities, we dig into the pros and cons, the whys and the hows, and the hard questions you need to ask before choosing a facility and what goes into that choice. No, you don't want to start making wine at the nearest crush pad unless it also stands up to some thorough evaluation. Jack's custom crush facility in Sonoma, Magnolia, is also the home of his winery, Fresco, which he originally started as Fresh Wine Company in an attempt to cause us to think about wine the way that we think about produce, as a product that is grown. Think of that. Jack is deeply involved in regenerative agriculture through both Fresco and Magnolia, and he makes an incredibly important point about it. Basically, true regenerative agriculture implies working with degraded or poorly managed land, not pristine, organically farmed vineyards. And that means that regenerative agriculture is about building bridges between farmers and winemakers with different and even opposing philosophies. I love that Jack embodies true regenerative agriculture with both Fresco and Magnolia, and I think he does that with very smart, empathetic, and trust-building interactions that set an example, an amazing example, that we can all learn from. Enjoy. Jack, welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, well, happy Valentine's Day. Also,
a very happy Valentine's Day.
Where are you right now?
Right now, I'm in my office in Sonoma, Sonoma Valley, just south of the town of Sonoma on 8th Street. It's my the winery I run called Magnolia Wine Services, custom crush facility.
Yeah, you're a pretty busy guy because you not only have a winery, but you run multiple other people's winery in a sense.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of think of my personal wine brand Fresco sort of nestled in like a Russian doll within the umbrella of Magnolia.
I like that.
Yeah. And so there's several other wine brands that all make wine here, and someone's got to tell people, when to get their glass delivered so we can get the bottling truck in. So,
right.
And then, make sure we have the filtered wine that goes before the unfiltered wine, and, that kind of stuff, so that everything gets done to a T. And so that's me.
Right. And what came first, Fresco or Magnolia Wine Services?
So I started working at this winery before it was Magnolia. And at that point, I started Fresco. But that was really just about 8 months of overlap. So Fresco's a little older, but they're about the same age.
Well, so this sounds interesting. So it sounds like you started as an employee of the place that you now run.
That's exactly right.
Okay. What's your? Yeah, go ahead.
My uncle was a longtime client at this custom crush facility, and he was pretty entrenched here. One of the bigger, accounted for much of the volume.
Yeah, some people would probably know his vineyard.
Old Hill Ranch is the vineyard. Buckland is his wine brand. He's Will Buckland. He's a very, I call him an OG farmer. He's been around in the industry for 40 or so years. And the vineyard predates him by about 100 years. So
Right. It's one of the legacy vineyards, one of the well-known legacy dry farmed, like, yeah, one of the, it's planted with what, some 30 some different varieties, and
you got it.
all different, like all the sort of, back when they would just do a whole array of things and then do one pick, and it
Exactly
was
right.
like,
And so we still do it that
it's,
way. Um,
yeah.
for the most part, all the old vines get picked together, fermented together as a field blend, and they make one wine, which calls the Ancient.
Mm.
And it's delicious. It's really age-worthy, and it's Zinfandel based, but there's Petit Syrah, there's Alicante Boucher, and then, like you said, about 30 other varieties, and pretty small concentrations mixed
some
in.
some whites and reds,
Yep,
right?
exactly right.
Or whites and blacks, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So that's him, and he was a longtime client of the Custom Crush, and
And the guy who was running it, was ready to put it up for sale. So he
okay,
wanted to get out of having clients, and Will didn't want to move, and I wanted to sort of take the next step in my winemaking career. So, it was a pretty good opportunity to have a fully operational winery. Take control of that. So we purchased all the equipment, took over the lease. That was early 2020. And then the pandemic hit, so it was a pretty shocking time to be making that kind of expenditure. But
whew.
um, you know, the nice thing about wine, or I don't know if it's nice or not, but I think it moves on kind of a slower cycle. So
Yeah.
while we definitely
Right.
have felt the impact, at least in winemaking, it's the impact has been more spread out. We've been able to
Like,
pivot a little more
yeah, I
quickly.
think there's pros and cons to that slower pace.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
um, One of the major cons is the delayed return on investment.
Yeah, yeah, it's a capital intensive industry for sure.
Well, let's dig into Fresco a little bit, which I think you started as Fresh Wine Company, and you've sort of abbreviated it, or was it always Fresco in your mind?
Well,
And
when I started the brand, what I really wanted was for people to think about their wine the way they think about their produce. So, you might have someone who
mm,
goes to the farmer's market for their peaches and their lettuce, but they buy wine from the supermarket. And
right.
it's like I understand that, but my hope is to get people over the mental hump and just think about wine as a product that is grown just like many other products that they consume, most other products they consume. So, Fresh was the idea, and then Fresh was taken. Like most great ideas, someone I had it for 20.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out how to make it more unique, and then so Fresh.co, sort of an abbreviation for the Fresh Wine Company, but it all became complicated. So what we're going with now is Fresco. Just call it Fresco.
I love it. So talk about what you do with Fresco. What are the wines that you make?
So
Is it
yeah, so I make natural wine, as I define it. Some wines being 0.0, no ads or takeaways. Some wines having a little bit of sulfur added at bottling, and occasionally a little bit of acidulation and watering back if I miss a pick. But
yeah.
the grapes all come from Sonoma Valley, and they're all farmed regeneratively, which is kind of a broad definition, but in general, it means getting people to stop spraying herbicide at the very bare minimum, and then working towards reduced to no tillage, reduced to no irrigation, and also often bring animals into the vineyard.
Nice. So and by that you mean domesticated animals used
Yeah,
for.
yeah, that's a big part of it. I think we could have a whole other conversation about fences and wild
Yeah.
animals, but but what I was referencing was sheep in the vineyard.
Yeah. Got it.
Um,
How many vineyards are you working with?
right now, I'm working with 3 growers who have maybe 6 vineyards between them.
Oh, nice.
Uh,
So what are you making? What kind of?
So I make sort of more normal varieties, and I can tell you why I do that. But the big bottling I just did was for the orange Sauvignon Blanc, so a little skin contact on my on Sauvignon Blanc. I make a Chardonnay, And then sort of my flagship, I would say, the one I started with year one and made every year is the Primitivo, which I do a rosé
Hmm.
and a red, and sometimes a pet nat from it as well. So the Primitivo being this vineyard that is own rooted and dry farmed, which I really, which is so it's farmed without sprays of any kind. So that's kind of a, just a really, it's a nice benchmark for other growers who are considering changing their practices to know that, like, you can get away with in this region, you can get away with a lot less.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was reading on your website about that, and I was like, "Is that every year? Is that? I mean, do they sort of play it by ear and see what the conditions are, or like?"
So the farmer is this kind of interesting guy named Ross Kennard. Ross has learned a
Oh,
lot from his dad, and his dad grew, for the most part, vegetables for Chez Panisse for a long
okay.
time, and he's since passed that business down to his son. So Ross grows the vegetables, and and then he, sort of as a side hustle, has this vineyard that he leases, and all that. Backstory is to say that Bob has gone without spraying grapes, a lot. And a lot of that maybe has to do with own rooted, right? Which he's worked with a fair amount. I think it just has less vigor. And
Hmm.
so this being an own rooted site, and maybe there's something unique about the site. I've yet to understand exactly why it doesn't get mildew, except that my understanding is that maybe sprayers or farmers spray because they don't want to get mildew before they know for sure if they're going to get it. Or
Yeah.
so, and I was talking to Ross about this weekend, because it's hard to kind of intimate to other people why it works, how it works, especially people who have been spraying for generations. And it's not like there is no mildew in that vineyard. There's small sites, there's a couple rows on one end, and then right in the middle and another end. So what he's kind of considering this year is taking out the vines that do get it regularly. That's like two rows that are right under a tree. They're real shaded,
Ah.
and then and then monitoring the other section that gets it and spot treating that with a backpack sprayer, if necessary.
Huh.
So I would just my thought was that about that whole spray no spray, is it possible? Is that just, I think people are to spray to protect, to cover their ass, which I think is totally reasonable, especially if you're running a bigger vineyard. But
Yeah.
with Ross, he's able to shoulder the risk, and it's worth it, because it saves several, 4 or 5 tractor passes a year, or more,
Yeah.
depending where you're at. And so that versus the small crop loss that he has to, sacrifice every year is worth it.
Well, I mean, with organic spraying, I mean, if you if you get mildew, it's too late. I mean, everything in organic is preventative, and I think
Yeah,
that's part of it as well. Like if you're willing to spray something systemic, a fungicide rather than a prophylactic, then great. You could wait until you see a problem and then go out and spray it. But if you are being preventative, yeah, I think it's that gamble. Like if you don't spray it and then something happens, well, too bad. Like you missed the opportunity. You
yeah.
can only prevent. So I think that's in organic the risk. So I guess it depends on what you're spraying.
And I will say,
Uh,
year one, that for me, that's 19. We didn't spray, obviously, and we didn't get mildew, but there was some botrytis.
okay,
So in that case, I went through. Actually, I had the time at that point, so I went through myself and dropped clusters that were moldy, that had
okay,
botrytis. So there are some pest pressors there. It's not the mildew that everyone sort of assumes you're going to get every year. That hasn't really shown
right,
to be the issue that everyone worries about.
yeah, yeah. No, it probably is. I mean, and we probably do have a lower tolerance than we need to have for. I mean,
Yeah,
we could have a higher tolerance probably for mildews and things like that as well too. It's
and
like you said, there's
there's a very real chance that one year, Ross and I get completely shafted by this. Um, so
right.
it's playing. It's you're kind of playing on the edge a little bit.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, that's interesting though. I that was. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, I got to ask about that. That sounds really interesting. I mean, especially in vinifera, like if it was, if it was
Right.
native, if it was native vines, then I think I wouldn't be that surprised. But yeah.
And
Uh,
my other growers, they are doing organic sprays, mostly sulfur, and they're on the sort of interval of like 20 days or so. That's more than you would generally get in sort of textbook agriculture, viticulture. Um,
uh-huh.
it's more like 10 to 14 for sulfur. But if you're in there, if you're attentive, there it's the option is there for
Yeah,
um, for some spraying, but less. So
right,
instead of doing 4, 5, 6, 7 spray passes, that's like 3 or 4.
right. Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, that all sounds good. So what got you started in this kind of farming? Promoting this kind of farming and making wine this way. Like, why is that the
the
way
you
that
know
you went?
Yeah, so I worked, maybe eight or nine harvests, several different countries, mostly conventional wine. Um, but I had grown up, with my grandmother had an organic farm, produce farm here in the valley, and so I was, always figured that organic was just kind of the my baseline of how I'd want to do it. But then I wanted to sort of elevate my career, and I went to study at the Santa Rosa Junior College, um, which I learned a lot there, a lot of hands-on knowledge, and a lot of it was sustainable agriculture through that lens. So I guess I like to joke that that's where I got radicalized. Um, because that's where I realized, it sort of opened my eye to like, wow, all these vineyards that I've been driving around, that I've been enjoying the wine from, and their undervine is so clear and and clean, and the whole vineyard is so well manicured, and I never really stopped to think about how they got it that way, and it turns out that it's by spraying a lot of herbicide that they
Yeah.
get those vineyards to be so clean,
Yeah.
and then then I took a soil science class, which sort of alerted me to the idea that you can really have a positive impact on carbon emissions, or I guess you'd call it a negative impact. You could
Right.
confuse myself. You can store carbon in the
A
soil
beneficial
if you
impact.
farm
Right.
more regeneratively. So that is, you know, I,
Right.
there's so many industries out there where you're emissive sort of by definition, transportation, producing energy, all that. But with agriculture, there's a window for sequestering carbon. You can
Right.
actually be a carbon sink, or at least
Right.
neutral is probably more achievable. But that was where the light bulb clicked. It's like, geez, we're making farming all these vineyards in Sonoma Valley, and there's a lot of them are farmed with Roundup or equivalents, and it's just a damn shame that we can't do more to enhance our environment,
Yeah.
improve our environment. So that I guess having the education helped, and then I sort of around the same time I started drinking natural wine. I went and spent a couple days up at the Katuri winery, and it seemed to me that because natural wine and organics are inherently linked. That is just a really good way of telling the story of regenerative viticulture is through natural wine.
Why do you say that?
So it's easy for me to have this wine and say this is literally just grape juice from organic grapes, and I think that's a pretty powerful story. Whereas
Yeah.
if you're making wine in a more conventional way, you have to it's not, even if you're using organic grapes, it's just not as easy to say. Um, not as easy. I just feel like it's harder to communicate because they're not inherently linked. And you could say, well, this one brand is organic, whereas the rest of them aren't. With natural wine, because I wouldn't consider it natural wine if it didn't come from an organic source, organic practicing source, then it's harder to get that point across. Does that
Yeah.
make sense, Adam? Am I way off base there?
Yeah, no. I just would love. Yeah, I'm just trying to draw you out, and I love. Yeah, I like hearing it in your words.
I hear you.
Yeah, I think I do agree. I would say very much, and yeah, I think it's especially when you go beyond organic, when you're not just stepping away from conventional and replacing conventional inputs with organic inputs. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like if you are actually trying to farm in a way that's in a self-contained way, that's like a closed loop, and like where you're building an ecosystem reflecting that, it just becomes a weird thing to think about. And then we're going to manipulate the grapes heavily once they come into the winery. It's like, well, wait, why did we do all that work
Right.
to then, alter it drastically, or even just follow a recipe, even if it's not like drastic alteration? It's like, if you're reading nature and you're working with nature as part of nature, you want to continue that process. Like the wine becomes just that final expression of all of the work that you've done. And yeah, I think the way you said it
Exactly.
is
And
very
so
clear.
with Fresco, I wanted to acknowledge that for farmers, it's not an easy transition. If you're on the cusp, you want to go, maybe you want to stop spraying herbicide, but you're like not sure you're going to get a return because you have your economic model, you know how much you make versus how much you spend, and all of a sudden you want to change things. There's a lot of risk there. So
Hmm.
my hope or my practice with Fresco is to guarantee a higher price for people than they have been getting for their strip sprayed fruit. So, you come, we meet, I like, the site, and you seem like you're really engaged in making that transition. Then, I will guarantee, a couple $100 more per ton than you've been receiving in acknowledgement of the fact that you're onboarding some risk to make this transition. So
You told me, you actually gave me a good example of that one. That actually happened with, which vineyard was it? I
it
forget.
was
I mean, I
the
don't know vineyard.
Fire Fuego, the Sauvignon Blanc vineyard that for fortuitously is just up the road from Magnolia. A
Nice.
friend
Yeah.
of mine, he's I guess he's owned it for 6 generations. He's the sixth gen to be on that land. It's been
Wow.
prunes, it's been pears, it's been walnuts, I think, and now in the last 40 or so years, it's been grapes. But it's usually mostly been farmed by an outside vineyard management company who is just more interested in getting it done and not spending a lot of time doing it. But Eric has to live on this land, and so he was really interested in invested in going to regenerative, and he's got the know-how. He works for an organic company, so he and I got together, and he was getting below county average on his grapes, and he was having a hard time selling them, even every year.
Yeah.
So year one, we converted his Sauv Blanc block, which is 3 acres, to organics, and doing a couple things like uh, limiting tillage to every other row, spreading. One of the cool things really is spreading clover by hand under the vine. So that's the bare area that's been sprayed
Right.
year after year with herbicides. It's kind of a blank canvas, and you're trying to get something to grow under there that maybe won't interfere with the vines as much. So a low growing clover, which also happens to fix nitrogen, is a really good fit for that. So Eric
Yeah.
went through and has been working on his cover crops, limiting irrigation, and I just spoke to him, in preparation for this interview, and he said he's talking about getting sheep in the vineyard. So that's really exciting to me.
Fantastic. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, you did guarantee to take all the grapes
Right. Okay. Right.
at a
Like you
higher
asked.
price, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I said that he was getting about $1,500 a ton, and there was just they would go to one company this year and then it would fall off the next year and not get picked, and so I said I'll take the whole block and I'll take it for the next 3 years, and hopefully many years from there. But and
Right.
what I'd like to do is start raising the price of the bottle so I can raise the price that I pay him for
Right.
the grapes. So not like I don't want to be crazy expensive, but I want him to be fairly compensated for his risk and for his work.
Right. And I guess I just what I like about this, or what I want to draw attention to, I guess better way to put it, is when you talk about regenerative. I mean, you're not just talking about that you are supporting regenerative farming. Like, you're not just talking about like you want to go work with the Buckland Old Hill ranches of the world. You are actively seeking out places that you want to convert, and you're giving them incentives to do that, and thereby actually regenerating a piece of land through your winery.
Right, right.
Through the, that's yeah.
If we're not realistic about the risk that the farmers take on, then we're not going to be able to convert as much. So hopefully, as Fresco grows, I can work with more farmers and convert more acreage into regenerative is my goal. And I work pretty much exclusively within Sonoma Valley, which is one watershed where my folks live, where I work, and so it's personal to me too. So
Yeah.
but it's not like pie in the sky. Like there's a real economic model through which Fresco can provide the funds for farmers to transfer their practices.
Well, it's funny you say that, and you had talked about how you were radicalized, and um, I just wonder to what extent in that area that you're farming and making wine, do you seem like an outlier? I mean, is there? I know there's a lot of entrenched, conventional thinking, conventional in the sense of agricultural practices and winemaking thinking. Do
Yeah.
you, I mean, do you get pushback? I mean, is there a vibe there that's
Um,
changing? Like, is there a new generation that's changing, or is it I mean, because of the risk and because of the sort of business models that have been at play, is there like basically a machine that's really, the dominant industry model?
it's a good question, Adam. I think that there's more openness now to these kind of paradigm shifts than there have been in the past. But yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle. I don't know if there's going to be huge pushback unless I start, a smear campaign, which is not my goal. I'm hoping to have an open arms approach,
Yeah.
so that you can get more dialogue. Because I guess what I would say is that it doesn't seem like there's a whole bunch of people in the organic regenerative paradigm who talk with people in the conventional paradigm.
Mm,
And so, maybe I can be that bridge or one of the
yeah.
bridges.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's a good transition into talking about Magnolia too. If
Right.
if you think so,
Yeah, definitely.
because I mean, let's talk about what's kind of special and unique about Magnolia and what's going on there. Who your clients are. I mean, we
Yeah.
know one big one, but what's going on there?
So Magnolia Wine Services is a grower producer, natural wine leaning, custom crush facility. So we make wine across the spectrum, from natural to conventional, and most things kind of fall more in between.
Hmm.
Um, and the main emphasis I really am trying to make is on organic fruit sourcing.
Yeah.
I don't really care that much if you filter or you add sulfur at this point or that point, or whatever other additives you may want to put in there. That doesn't bother me that much. But if you're sourcing from grapes that aren't farmed with care for the land that they're grown on, then that's it's problematic to me. At the same time, we're not 100% strictly enforcing that. So there are a lot of legacy clients who came with the property, came with the winery and such, who maybe aren't 100% on board with that yet. But my hope, again, is to have that open arms approach so that we're working with people who, you know, they see that I'm genuine and I see that they're genuine, and that, maybe they can have the dialogue with their growers. So rather than switching away and leaving this vineyard to be farmed the same way, it's like maybe you can convert that block, and block by block we can do that. It's a slow process, but that's the idea.
Yeah, and when we talked beforehand, I think I was trying to ask you that question, which I could ask again about, like, it is the hard question of, like, well, how's that different than anybody else? Are you just open to, anybody that comes with cash and wants to make wine there?
Well, it depends how
And
much cash, Adam.
exactly,
No,
exactly.
I think that's a really good point. We're there's a lot of things that I could talk about, of examples of people who are making great wine from organic fruit, but and I would probably estimate, as an aside, that's probably 90 to 95% of the fruit in here, which maybe does distinguish us from most other people. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, not having those hard limits is definitely something that keeps me up at night a little bit. But like I said, I want to be an open arms approach. I think you get a lot further with that. So if you're someone who's if we have a client who's been sourcing the same fruit from the same block for the last 6 years and it happens to be strip sprayed, if I tell that client, okay, no, you can't bring those grapes in here anymore. Those grapes are still going to be strip sprayed, and they're just going to go to someone else. But if I
Right.
tell this client, why don't can you have a conversation with your grower and see if there's any opportunity to change the farming paradigm. That is, and it happens, and that is a much better outcome for everyone.
Yeah, and that only happens in a trust, in a relationship of trust that you can build. I mean, this I'm echoing sort of the answer that you gave me at the time that I first asked you this question, which is like only by keeping that open arms policy to anybody, or not, anybody, but being selective about people, but to be open allows a relationship of trust to build and allows them to be exposed to everyone else who works there and the kind of winemaking they're doing,
Right.
seeing the examples that they're providing of different ways of thinking and doing things with wine, and builds that trust so that when you have those conversations, it's not just like it's not out of the blue, it's out of
Right. It
an
should not be
ongoing
a
thing.
one-way street.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important thing in a lot of in every aspect of life, that we don't reduce ourselves to cliques that can't communicate with each other, and just can only disagree and be polarized. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think that was a good answer. I just wanted to draw that out. And as you were talking
Yeah.
about
Thank
the
you.
farming and what you do with Fresco, and then how that translates here as well. Well, what else is going on there? I mean, let's talk about some of, what is the vibe, and who are the people that you can talk about that are making wine, and
Sure.
what are they doing?
Yeah, I guess the other thing
You
that
know,
does make Magnolia really different is the sort of community we built here. So trying to encourage people of different socioeconomic backgrounds and different races and genders to come out here and make wine um, has been a big part of it, and it's really been fun to empower younger people and people who look different than me to make wine here. We've got a couple great brands that are all in. But really, the nice thing I would say about Magnolia is that like people are happy to say, yes, I make my wine at a custom crush facility, and it's Magnolia.
yeah,
A lot of wine that's made at custom crush facilities, you never hear about the production, and it can be great wine, but it's the vibe. Being able to make it obvious that we're different just by being here, and make people want to be part of the story is great. So probably my closest friend that I make wine with here is Marioni, Dan Marioni. He came from Sonoma Mountain Winery, which is based out in the Coturri Winery with Tony. And then obviously there's my uncle, Will Buckland. A couple other great brands, Dos Piedras, Sonoma Valley or Napa Valley Zin, and some foothills. Syrah, drawing a blank. Darling Family Wines. That's a great mom and pop shop. Makes wine here. Ardeur with Jason Rupert is a good buddy. There's plenty more, and I can list them off, but I don't know if
it's
that's the best
yeah,
use of
it's
our time. So there's
right. Well, can you sort of explain what a custom crush facility is, and what that
yeah.
means as a winery?
So custom crush is kind of what it sounds like. We at Magnolia own the tanks, we own the crushing equipment, and we have the lease to a facility with water treatment and barrel storage, like temperature control uh, capabilities,
Forklifts.
forklifts, and some personnel who know what they're doing. And then say that you're someone who wanted to start a wine brand, and you're looking around, and holy crap, it's so expensive to buy land in California to build a winery. It's
Uh-huh.
expensive to buy tanks and forklifts. It's expensive to put in drainage. It's expensive to do all these things, not to mention the labor costs. So, and you only want to make a couple hundred cases, or that's where you want to start. So you would most likely find a custom crush facility, someone who owns the tanks and owns and owns the equipment needed to make wine. And you would contract with them to make the wine as you want them to do it, and then to age it, and more than likely help you bottle it, and then ship it out to a warehouse somewhere, so you could start selling it. So there's a lot of ways that these companies can run. Um, there's people who can sort of you just do it all by email. and you're not really actually there, and you're just telling them what ads to make and what protocol to follow. And then there's more hands-on ones. I would say Magnolia is pretty darn hands-on. Where if you wanted to do your own punch downs every day, you'd be welcome to, assuming that you have all the right insurance and such. And
Right.
if you want to do your own topping, you're welcome to do that. I try to kind of draw the line at forklift driving for random people. We just trying to run a safe shop here. It doesn't really not really can't do both. But yeah, so in general, I've got a tank and a bin and cooling and a press and all the things, and you would just pay like a rate per ton to crush here, and then we would help you make your wine. And I'm here to give you some advice and consult and make sure that what you want to do is safe and but generally you get to do what you want. And the nice thing actually about this model is that some of our employees have been able to start their own wine labels, so we can, give people a better price because they work here and they can crush their own grapes and make their
Yeah.
own wine. So we had my employee Coral did this last year, and she was, and she's stoked. She's about to bottle the wine and start selling it and have her own wine brand. And I
That's
don't know that she would
fantastic.
have been that engaged if she hadn't been making her own wine, but she's a great addition to the team. So it's been
That's awesome.
it's been fun to sort of help people get their start, as I was able to get my start here in the same way.
Yeah, I love that. Now, and you allow people to do their own kind of winemaking. I mean, it's the whole range, like you said.
There's there's a few clients who do almost everything themselves. There's a very few clients who we do everything for them. Most people kind of fall in between. It's like
uh
you're making wine, but you probably also have a real job or a side, a day job, for most people. And
Sure.
so, is it really feasible to be there for every punch down if that needs to happen once in the morning, once in the afternoon? I don't think that really is that feasible, and for most people. And so they would just, maybe they do the PM punch down and we do the AM punch down for them. Or,
Right.
they can't get there that day, so we do the PM for them also. Or, that kind of stuff. It's a little bit more in between for most clients. Not everyone needs to do their own topping. They just like to check in on their wine once in a month, every couple months. But they don't need to top it every month because they can trust that we're going to get it done, you know.
Right.
Um, so yeah, the crush time is sort of the busy time when you're trying to get in between, make sure everyone has enough of what they need and not too much of, so they're not, people can share resources, I guess, is the key thing. Make sure
Yeah.
everyone knows how to clean things properly, put things away properly. That's a big deal. Getting people to not lose things.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a little experience with this because that's kind of how we have to make our wine because we live in Los Angeles
Mm-hmm.
and, the vineyards are not in, I mean, actually, we do have now vineyards in our yard, but, but, not to the extent that we can make as much wine as we want to yet because we have a
Yeah.
very small yard. But so we're buying grapes out, and to set up a winery in LA is incredibly difficult and expensive. So we're doing the same thing where we have an alternating proprietorship relationship with our winery, and this is our third winery essentially that we've been to, and so I guess one of the things I was gonna ask was just some of the things from the inside that we could talk about as people should think about when if they were going to do this, like if what should they look for, what kind of questions should they ask to an owner of a custom crush facility, or a winery owner who's willing to do an alternating proprietorship relationship,
Yeah.
to make sure that they're getting what they really want and have the right expectations going into this if they want to make a little wine. Because yeah, I mean, there I will say, just from my experience, there's a wide range of
Oh
quality
yeah.
in both the facilities, the equipment that's used, the care of the owners and the expertise of the owners. So those are all kind of things. But from your perspective, what do you think people should be asking you when they're coming to potentially sign a contract to make some wine with
Yeah,
you?
that's a great question. One thing I would think about is what's your lot size going to be. I think that's one of the more underrated things about making quality wine is, are you going to put 1 ton of grapes into a 4-ton tank because they don't have any 1-ton bins. How are they
Right.
going to accommodate you? Because probably if you're starting out, you probably have smaller lot sizes. So can this winery accommodate that? Here at Magnolia, we start charging basically our minimum is 1 ton. So that kind of fortunately is the amount that most ferment bins hold. So
Yep.
um, and I think that's kind of the minimum that you can make. It becomes harder to make good wine at smaller volumes than that, in my
Yeah.
experience. So volume
Yeah.
size, that would be something I'd pay attention to. Does their equipment match the size of tank the size of bin that I'm going to bring in? And if not, like, can I buy some, cheaper tanks to accommodate that? Like figure out what you're going to have to buy to work with them, and then is that going to fit in there? Are they going to be able to store it for me in the off season or not? Is another thing. So, um, yeah, lot size is important. Cleanliness. Walk in there. Does it smell like vinegar? Does it smell like a really bad winery? Like like spoiled wine. Are there flies everywhere? You know, I'm not going to say there's no fruit flies here at Magnolia, but right now you'd have a hard time finding one.
Yeah.
So that's I think an important thing is sanitation level, especially if you're making natural wine. I think it's really key to be sanitary,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna have to there's gonna have to be a lot of trust involved in this. Wine is this sort of very it's it's close to people's hearts. Every barrel of wine that's made in here, someone really loves. I would
Yeah.
say most of them at least. So does is the person who's going to be in charge of taking care of your wine? Do they care? And that's a little bit harder to suss out, but I would say it's really important. I would say I care about all the barrels of wine that we make, and maybe if we made twice as many barrels, I would be at my limit, but we don't have space for that. So I think it's a good size here right now where I can have my hands into each. I have an idea of what's going on with each lot of wine that we made this year, which is almost 100, and
Wow.
and I can and I have a connection with them, and so I know all the people who are in here, and I'm close with them, and I'm friendly with them, and so that means that like if they email me and they say, can you top my wine this week, like I'm gonna do it because I care, and if I can't do it, I'm not gonna say yes I can do that. I'll say we got to push it back to next week because we're bottling or something like that. But there's what that sort of also means is that there's a dialogue
Yeah.
that I'm willing to have with my clients. And so I would say that anyone who's gonna go in there, you're probably gonna be small fry to start off. So is there gonna be buy-in from them, from the people making your wine or not?
Right. Yeah. My experience is people like you in your position, especially certain times of year, are incredibly busy, and like you said, if you're coming in, you're usually not coming in to make to crush 10 tons right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not, and even 10 might be small depending on the facility. So you have to think about like, what is the communication like? I think is another one that I've found to be really important. Like,
Yeah.
how quickly do I get a response? And I think you have to be realistic. Like I said, you in your position are incredibly busy because you're managing, you just said, like 100 lots of wine, and that's over a couple dozen different wineries. It's a lot to manage for one person, and somebody does have to do that, and somebody does have to be the point of contact. And so having realistic expectations about what kind of communication you're going to get, but then also getting communication in
Yeah.
general is really important. I mean, it might be like maybe it's 24 hours that you wait, but do you have to wait a week to hear back about something? Because that would be difficult.
Yeah.
That would be really hard to make wine that way, because
Yeah.
sometimes decisions are very time sensitive. So
Absolutely.
it's yeah, so I think that's another one. And I mean, it's something that I've yeah run into problems with, not nowhere where I am now, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of a big red flag. Yeah, what else? I'm trying to think.
Oh, another good thing probably would be to try some of the wine that they make. Um,
Yes,
that's
yes.
there's so many decisions that go into one bottle of wine that I wouldn't say let one tasting experience sort of inform the um whole production method, but do try the wine and see what their ethos is. And
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's true too in terms of if the contract stipulates like this is the way that we make wine, and if you don't want to make wine this way, you'll have to sign a waiver kind of thing.
Yeah,
That's not a good sign. Just from my experience, you should be free to make the decisions about your wine that you want to make.
that's for sure. Yeah,
And not feel like you're constantly fighting against what somebody wants to just have like a one size fits all approach to all the wine that they make at their facility. I think is just
right.
something to watch out for. There's a lot of ways that you might notice that. But yeah, that's never a good sign, because like you said, it is one of those things where it's like you do need to know that when you've asked for an action to be taken with your wine, that it will actually take place, in a reasonable amount of time, like within the with and that time would be communicated to you. Yeah, we can take care of that tomorrow, or yeah, we can't tomorrow, we're bottling, but we'll get to that right after that. And then you need to feel confident that that will actually happen. Yeah, because that's or and not that you're. I think having an adversarial relationship with the kind of wine that you want to make. Like if you want to make natural wine and you're at a conventional, a place that clearly makes wine from a recipe, and you're trying to do something different from that, it's kind of scary because you just are always going to be wondering, like, did they sulfate my wine, like
Yeah,
just because they forgot, or just because they don't care and they don't want to deal with doing something different for me. Yeah, so all important things to think about. Yeah, anything else? Well, any
well, I would say with Magnolia, one of our big selling points, we don't have an optical sorter. We don't have the nicest crush equipment of all time, but we might have the nicest people of all time making wine here, and that
mm.
the community here is something that I get kind of weepy and emotional about at times. It's a really really excellent cast of characters. Everyone's different. Everyone's kind of a little bit misfit in the best way, and together, Magnolia is something really special, really close to my heart, and so having that kind of relationship with the people you work with would be the thing that I would say above all else is what makes it. It's you're making wine. You're not. It's supposed to be fun. So hopefully you're with people who make it fun.
How did that happen? I mean, was that just you, uh, making decisions based on good values that translated into finding those people that to work with you?
It's a great question. How did that happen? I think, that we started with a good core crew between my uncle and myself and Dan. And then, I think there's a need for this sort of grower producer, natural leaning, custom crush facility in Sonoma Valley. There it turns out there's a lot of people who kind of value that service, and then just
Hmm.
having been in the industry in the area for the last 8 to 10 years is really helped. So that's I would say just that mostly that is just being in a position to bring people in who need it, who need this kind of service, and then being able to choose the people who are uh, friendly and love what they do and are happy to be here. I think that's a big thing. People who are come to me and they want to make wine here and they're stoked to be here. Those are the people who move to the front of the line.
Yeah, that's great. And you're looking for people still, right?
Well, we are
Are you
always looking for
full?
people, but it's always tough because most people who make natural wine from this area sort of pick within a certain window, and then we have sort of the older guard who kind of pick in a slightly later window, and
Right,
then it's like if you can bring in grapes outside that window, I'm like I'm it's a lot easier for me to say yes,
right,
and I also have to send everything upstairs, so it's not just my decision as well. It
right,
just has to make
right.
sense. So I'm always really stoked if people reach out and we can definitely have a conversation. And we're always
So
looking for
maybe
people. It's just I can't always say yes to everyone.
can you handle apples at your
Yeah,
facility?
we did some. We actually did a couple apples. We did a cider this year, and we did an
Uh-huh.
apple and wine co-ferment. Um,
Okay.
But it turned, we used our press for apples, and we had to use a bunch of rice hulls So I would probably recommend. We're not quite set up for it yet, and it would definitely be something I'd love to do in the future, because that definitely comes in sort of more either early or late, or kind of whenever you want, because the apples store really well.
Right, that's what I was thinking for you. Like, if you could handle apples, you're like, so like what we're looking for is a larger client who does apples and can pick in
also has their
December.
own great or apple crusher.
Right.
So if you know
Very
anyone,
good.
no, we're like I said, we're open to a lot of things, a lot of sort of different different ways of making wine, and all that. I just has to, I don't want to say yes and then that means that some other client doesn't have tank space.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be a case by case basis, and there's an evaluation that would have to take place to make
Exactly
sure
right.
it was a good fit.
Yeah.
With everybody else that's already there. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, uh, is Fresco wine out in the world? How do can people order direct? What's
You
the
are
best way to?
definitely welcome to order direct. My website is www.fresh.wine. And I have most of my wine up there on the website, what I have left. A lot of it also goes through distribution, so it should be pretty easy to find if you're in the Bay Area or LA and shopping at a natural wine store. I would say, my distributor does a pretty good job of blanketing the region with the wine. But if you want to support me, the best way to do that is to order off the website.
And does Magnolia have its own website as well?
We're bootstrapping the whole thing, so we don't have our own website at the moment.
Is
but
there, like, if somebody was desperate to see if they could work with you, would you?
Yeah, no, the best way is just to email.
I'm just bleeping out this section because Jack gave his personal email and later asked that we use this one, freshwineco@gmail.com. So if you want to get in touch with Jack, email him at freshwineco@gmail.com.
And I'll sort you out. We'll definitely have a conversation. It happens semi-regularly that people reach out looking for crush space. So I've had that conversation before. I'm happy to have it again.
And do you have like a price sheet and service sheet that you
exactly
send people
right
to review?
Yeah, it's fairly we're trying to make it not the most expensive place in the world, but also enough that we can afford to pay a living wage to everyone who works here. So that's a fine balance. And so it's prices aren't going to be what they used to be, I will say.
Right. Yep. Well, very cool. Did we miss anything? Is there anything else you want to say about Magnolia or Fresco?
With Fresco, I would just say that I make wine that my hope is that for most of my wine, it's natural wine that you could probably bring to your parents and they would enjoy. So it doesn't have those super wacky out there flavors, more restrained winemaking, sort of classic techniques.
Yeah.
To hopefully, again, to talk about being a bridge to people who think that natural wine is all high VA and icky. Because you can make wine without additives or with very few additives that taste great for years if you're careful about it. And so just opening people's minds to the way that wine can be made.
Yeah, I'd say that about Centralas, my brand as well. It's like natural wine for people who don't like natural wine.
Yeah,
kind of thing. That's cool. I love that. It's very cool. Well, thank you so much. It was great talking and learning more about it.
It was a pleasure, Adam.
I hope people get to try your stuff. I hope I get to try your stuff. I'm going to look for it now.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, thank you.